Host Javier Vicuna.
And on today's show, we're going to be talking about human rights. We're going to be talking about what are human rights and discuss some events that are related to human rights. But before all that, here's Javier with the quote of the week.
Thank you, Santy. So first of all, I'm really excited to talk about this subject because I think it's something that we've kind of touched on, like in a few of our shows, but we haven't really fully had a show like talking about what human rights actually are. So the quote that I chose for today is, "To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity." This is, of course, a quote from the very great Nelson Mandela. Such an influential person. And this quote really just, to me, human rights is basically like part of you as a human being. Like as soon as you're born, human rights are the rights that are given to you like as soon as you come out of the womb, basically. That's the way I see it when I see human rights. And, to have human rights is to be free and to not have limits to what you can do. I mean, obviously there's limits like laws, obviously, but not having like limits such as, being able to do free speech or being able to express yourself or let others know about things that make you uncomfortable or anything like that. Like, being able to buy a house is a human right. So unfortunately, there are countries, though, that do not all have these kinds of rights available to them. Because the thing about human rights is that it's like a universal thing. Like it should, in a perfect world, it's a universal thing where every single country can follow those rights. Because the UN, the United Nations, came up with the human rights, like an official list of human rights that people are given. But not every country implements them. The government doesn't implement them all the time. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those countries, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that quote. I think the way I kind of deconstruct this quote, it's very, first you got to know what human rights are. It's like to deny people, to deny humans their human rights. What rights? It's to challenge their humanity. And the way I see it, kind of relating to Javier, is that part of what makes me human is the freedom of deciding who I want to be and what I want to be. And if you're restricted to what you can think and what you can be, it's basically taking away the potential that you have to, the potential that you can have that can make an impact not just in your life, but in the lives of others. But we're going to explain more what human rights are. So with that, I'm going to start off with, first of all, Javier, do you know what human rights, did they teach you human rights at school? Kind of, like, you don't need to explain, just briefly.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be honest, they didn't really teach us much about human rights in school. They just kind of just told us that, the Declaration of Independence, because that was kind of like the first step to having like American rights, but they didn't tell us specifically like what humans have as rights, not just Americans.
Yeah, the reason why I asked you is because when we were setting, the topic for this week, is we're doing human rights because today is Human Rights National Day. It's today, so we want to have this space to be able to learn, especially for me, I'm learning along the way, but as well as to just have this conversation on the table so you can go ahead and do your own research and be a voice for those who need a voice. So human rights are rights we have simply because we exist as human beings. So this is I took the definition of what human rights is, and I'll kind of adjust the way I see it. So human rights are rights we have simply because we exist as human beings. They are not granted by any state. These universal rights are inherent to us all, regardless of nationality, sex, nation or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. They range from the most fundamental, the right to life, to those that make life worth living, such as the rights to food, education, work, health, and liberty. So I just took that as freedom.
Exactly. That's the way I look at human rights too. It's just freedom.
Yeah, freedom to think, and also freedom to, I always thought like we were learned or taught a lot about our First Amendment, the freedom to religion, the freedom to speech. That's kind of like the human right that I kind of connect with. But really, human right also includes the right to have food. Right? We shouldn't be denied to be able to have food, education, and unfortunately, like Javier said, these are things that not everybody has the opportunity to live. A lot of people, so even the right to live, what does that mean? I took it as in there has been, for example, one thing that I noticed, and I was like, if someone murdered you, or if, that they're taking away the right for you to live. That's kind of how I connected those. I was like, oh, so there's more to just freedom of speech and freedom of religion. There's a lot more. How are human rights being protected? You might say, okay, thank you for the definition. How are those rights protected? Why? One of the things I always growing up, I asked is, how come not everybody lives by the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion? Mm-hmm. Like that question I always carried in the back of my head because here in America, it's like we're a mixture of different religions, right? There's so many. And in other places, it's like just one. So to me, it's, that question is like, how come not all of us have or live under the same thing? Because every country is different. So how are human rights being protected? So this is the international human rights law lays down obligations which states are bonded to respect. By becoming parties to international treaties, states assume obligations and duties under the international law to respect, to protect, and to fulfill human rights. The obligation to respect means that states must refrain from interfering with or curtailing the enjoyment of human rights. The obligation to protect requires states to protect individuals and groups against human rights abuses. The obligation to fulfill means that states must take positive actions to facilitate the enjoyment of basic human rights. Mm-hmm. This has a lot of information that might have your brain like, what? If you want to learn more information, you can go to www.un.org/n/about us and learn about the fundamentals of the international human rights. So there is a place that you mentioned, the United Nations, yep. Which has the United Nations human rights. And this has provided for a lot of countries to come together on an agreement of what human rights are and that they must be respected. This is the tricky part where I'm like, oof, if they're joined in that, that, what would you call that?
What do you mean, the United Nations? What I call the United Nations?
No, if they're joined in that group, the United Nations, basically. Yeah. If that country decides, well, they have to follow these rules. But there's a lot of countries that don't join. Yeah, well, not every country's in the United Nations. Yeah, so that leaves a lot of other countries. Yeah, that's why I'm like, that's the interesting part. But yeah, so I recommend that all of you guys go do your research. Go read all about these organizations, the United Nations. Go read about it. They have so many different articles, and those articles lead to other ones. So you go find more information about how human rights are being protected. And if you see that there isn't much being done, and if you think there could be more done, you're so welcome, to peacefully be a voice for many groups and people and communities. So these are just things that I know when I was reading all of this, I was like, whoa. But with that being said, Javier, can you please explain kind of like what I mentioned, that not everybody joins the human rights, United Nations human rights. Right. So that's the thing. And just actually going back to what you said, your explanation about how human rights are protected, a lot of these human rights, they have to be facilitated, as in they have to be put in place by someone. Yeah. And that usually that someone is the government of whatever country, is looking at those human rights. But there are many countries out there that don't
that their government does not follow those human rights whatsoever. And to kind of just put it into perspective, back in 2010, there was a survey. There was actually like a research done on which countries that weren't part of the United Nations, and that were having troubles with that had a lot of citizens from those countries that were complaining that they weren't having that they don't have human rights, that they have no. I know it's kind of like an old research article from 2010, but it's still a lot of the countries here that were listed. We're actually going to talk about a few later in the show because they're still having problems. So 17 countries and 3 territories were considered to be non-free areas. And listen to how they wrote it. They said non-free. And we're going back to human rights, we see that as freedom, right? Basic human rights is freedom. So if the government takes away the human rights of a person, they're taking away their freedom. It's that simple. And I mean, just knowing that there's 17 countries, and probably even more than, honestly, I probably think there's more than 17 countries because the world's huge, and not every country can go into the United Nations, and not every country has the same type of government or the same kind of people running the government. So, some countries, the women have less rights than men, just straight up. I know in America, they're doing their best to equalize both male and female genders, and they're actually trying. But there are countries out there that don't try at all. That it could either be based off of religion or other beliefs that the country follows that causes those human rights, those universal human rights that were created by the United Nations, to be basically not followed because of their religion or because of other values that country has gone through in history. And I think women struggle probably the most when it comes to human rights, just in about every country, just because they always get the bottom end of the stick on everything. And if you look at how America's first started, females were treated terribly and were considered way lower than men, and that over time Americans fought for that. They fought for those human rights, because human rights isn't male human rights. Because there's other quotes. When I was looking for quotes for this show, a lot of these leaders would quote that every man should have rights or something like that. They would always say man or male in whatever they were saying about human rights. But that's literally going against the point, because human rights doesn't have a gender to it. And I think that's
it's universal.
It's universal. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. So that's kind of my thoughts on just the general knowledge of knowing countries that struggle with human rights. Because it's not as simple as it is. It really isn't. It's not as simple as just the United Nations coming up with this list of human rights and giving it to another country and the country follows it. No, it's not that simple. The countries have other things that they want to control, or we'll talk about specific countries later on the show. But
and I think you mentioned something that the document that you can read and see about the human rights. It was created by a group of people. And I think that there's always two sides of different things. A lot of people might have questions and different things. And always okay, if you talk about freedom, I think one of the things that came to my head is, if you're talking about freedom, but there are so many laws that tell me how to be free. I think that's always something in my head. It's the freedom to speech and the freedom to religion. That is stated under a law. And I'm if you talk about freedom, nobody should be telling you what to do.
Exactly.
So I always, like you said, it's such a big topic, and a lot of people have different opinions. And I think the best thing is just educating yourself with credible resources and sources, because it's not just male or female; it's a universal thing. And if we could be a voice to protect those human rights that everybody should have, we should. And because it's very important.
It is important because people should be educated on what they're given, especially Americans here in country. I mean, we live in America. It's nice to have a country that, for the most part, does give people basic human rights, regardless of skin color or gender or any of that. But there are times in this country where they're not giving those human rights specifically to other people, such as racism. Racism is a violation of human rights. Why should someone not be getting the same treatment as someone else just because of their skin color? Like, that's against human rights. So that's why there's so many human rights. There's so much to it. And discrimination and keeping people from doing basic things is all a part of human rights. So that's why I think everyone should just at least research or look into what your human rights are as an American, if you live in America.
Yeah, with that being said, we're going to play a short PSA and we will be right back with more.
You and your community safe from the threat of a new coronavirus. There are steps you can take now to get ready if an outbreak occurs in your community. Make a household plan. Learn how to prepare and take quick action if someone gets sick. Older adults and people with chronic medical conditions are at greater risk. Take extra steps to protect them. Think about what you will do if there are changes to your work schedule. Remember to always practice good, healthy habits such as frequently washing hands with soap and water, staying home when sick, and covering coughs and sneezes. For more information, visit cdc.gov.
Welcome back, everybody. We're so excited that the holiday season is here. However, however, we're still under a pandemic and it's so hard. I want to throw a party and have all my friends over and family, but it's always good to stay cautious. I know a lot of people are vaccinated, but making sure, if it's too crowded, making sure you have a distance, wearing your mask, all of those things. I know it's really I'm getting irritated with it, but I know the importance of protecting not just us, but our family members. But yeah. On the other hand, though, here, Santa's coming. The kids' holiday cookie decoration and Santa visit is here. So visit us December 18th at the food distribution from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at 3240 Kerner Boulevard, Santa Fe, California. And it is free. So feel free to join for the cookie decorations and the Christmas in the Canal toy drive. So this event the gifts will be given to families on December 22nd at 3240 Kerner Boulevard. So if you signed up already, because I know we mentioned this before on last week's show, if you signed up, the toys will be given from 4 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. If you have any questions, you can call at the number 415-526-2486. And if you want to donate as well, you can call that number and they'll be giving you information on how you can donate. And if you have donated, thank you so much. We appreciate all the toys that are donated. Really, it's a joy to be able to bring light to young kids. We know a lot of families are going through a lot of stuff during the pandemic. So being able to give them a gift to bring a little bit of light is absolutely amazing. So thank you. Now we're going to talk about some compare and contrast of different countries. Especially the one we're in and the other countries surrounding the United States of America. So first I want to talk about kind of like we mentioned at the beginning, Javier, about the First Amendment, which covers the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a how do you say that? Redress of grievances? Is that how you say it?
Redress of grievances.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So we wanted to bring this up because we know that America is not perfect. There are a lot of things that need to be, needs a lot more work. And you mentioned before that America is doing a little something to be able to have equal rights for men and women, but there also is the race, right? Minority groups, whether you're Latino, person of color, all of these different minority groups, there's still a lot of work to be done. But we do have the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. So I believe in God, and I can say that in this country, I can say I believe in God on camera. I can say I believe in God, and I'm not afraid that I'm going to be, you're going to go to jail because you mentioned that your faith. That's a huge thing. And being able to say what I think and knowing that I have the freedom to do that, and the freedom, if I don't agree with something, I can go peacefully out there and protest against it. Just knowing that is a huge win, because not a lot of countries have that. As much as, like I said, America has a lot of work to be done, but there are a lot of things that we do have. And just using that, taking advantage of those freedoms that we have to be able to having those is just absolutely amazing versus those countries that don't have. For example, I'm going to give examples of countries that don't have these, and most of them are divided by gender. For example, I'm going to talk about in America. Growing up, there's a lot of, like you mentioned, the man is the head, and it's over the women. The women are downsized, and a lot of domestic abuse happening in relationships, especially to women, also to men too. And higher numbers are of women because women are not allowed to speak up because, you can't talk because I'm the man of the house. But they have the rights to an education, the rights to, all of these, the rights to have their own thoughts. And in an abusive relationship, a lot of those things are denied. And there are not a lot of laws protecting women in these countries. I know other countries are restricted of how much money they can make. I remember more back in the day, for example, Cuba is they were equally paid, right? And you couldn't win above anybody else. So there's restriction of that. And part of, for example, in America is, you can kind of. When I say this, a lot of people disagree with me, which I completely understand, is that you can choose how much money you can make. And a lot of people say, no, you can't. Well, the reason why I say that is because I'm not restricted to just, hey, you have to win this. You can create a business. You can, and your business can make more than of you getting an employment. So there's a lot of, you have control over your finances. So we have a lot of things in America. Like I said, we're not perfect though. It's not perfect.
But that's what protests and activists are for.
And you have the right to do that. And I think that's a powerful tool because there's a lot of countries that you can't do that.
No.
There are people that are shut out, which is crazy to think about.
So just going into that, I wanted to talk about North Korea, which is, compared to Cuba, also is a communist government. So that's what you were, that type of government.
That's what I was referring to.
Is communism. And now North Korea implements a very, very wow, like the restrictions that they have for their citizens is beyond a violation of human rights. It's very, very inhumane. And, North Korea gets such a bad rep, and I think it's for good reason, because the country is just under such a big dictatorship under Kim Jong-un. And, as much as, Americans love to, joke around about North Korea, they're not just a bunch of dumb people over there or something, America always likes to portray North Korea as we're friends with them one day and then we're not friends with them the other day. Mm-hmm. It's a very complicated country, and it's really interesting to see the contrast of North Korea and South Korea, because both North and South Korea are very different from each other, extremely different from each other. But some of the things that that North Korea does that violate human rights are, there's a lot. There's a big list, but I'm going to just name a few because it's a lot. So some of the human rights violations that are common there are unlawful or arbitrary killings by the government, forced disappearances by the government, torture and inhumane punishments by government authorities, harsh prison conditions, censorship, that's a big one, invasion of privacy, that's another big one, restrictions on the press and the internet, and so much more. Like I said, that's just a few, but just off of those, a human basically has no way of doing anything. They just have to stay there and listen to whatever their leader tells them to do, and they can't go against anything that the leader says to them. And I think that's just terrible. You know, how can a person live just listening to one person and not making their own decisions? You know.
Yeah, I think that if this is something that someone, you know, does want to live by, I think that's what I'm like. That's a human right. You can choose if you want to be a part of a government like that, and you can choose if you don't want to be a part of a government like that.
Well, sometimes people don't, you know, are born into that country.
Yeah, so exactly. So that's what I mean. I'm like, to me, it's like that because a lot of people I know, when as an outsider, you think, oh, that is not human rights. But when you talk to them, it's like, oh, it's normal to them. It's like the way they want to live. So to me, human rights is being able to say, if people don't like that they're so welcome and have the freedom to just, you know, not be in that type of restrictions. But if it is something that, because I know a lot of people, there's always mixed sides. For example, with the women who, we mentioned this before, that they cover absolutely everything. And if they see a woman who's, you know, wearing, so revealing a lot of stuff to them, it's like, oh, but we believe this. So I think just human rights to me absolutely means freedom. You get to decide how you want to live and and where you want to live. And you know, if you want someone to, which I doubt a lot of people want that, to be restricted completely, but just being able to have the freedom to choose is human rights to me. At least that's how I see it. Because I know a lot of people get offended with, you're talking about how that's the lifestyle, you know, that I like. So a lot of people, you know, but to me, like you mentioned too, it's just freedom. Yep, freedom to choose.
Huge.
And every country is different. And that's when I'm like, yes, let's push for being voices for human rights, because there are a lot of people who are being shut out completely and need a way out. So if you know, like I said, do your research, because you can support a lot of organizations that push for human rights in your country or universal.
And the thing about human rights too is that, again, the government is the one that's facilitating them for whatever country it is. And there's only so much that another country could do to help another country that's struggling with human rights, because then that's when conflict starts. You know, that's when a country's like, well, why?
It's so complicated.
Why are you trying to get into our business? You know, like, and that's how wars start. So that's like, you could only do so much.
Yeah,
with
and
others.
I think also, I think human rights hasn't been spoken so much in the past, but with technology today, I feel like a lot of other people are seeking human rights now because of social media, because they see the difference of where they're living versus where somewhere else, how they're being treated. For example, I'm going to talk about this in the second part, but one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that social media plays a big part about how human rights is getting more, you know, awareness.
Yeah,
right?
so like bringing awareness of like other countries that are violating human rights.
Yeah, because you see social media and you see, okay, there are some very disturbing videos out there.
Yeah, there is.
And then it's like, whoa. And so people are seeking help. And there's a lot of things that, you know, each country, even if they want to hide certain things, like it's social media, with social media and technology in general and the internet, it's getting a lot harder for people to just ignore, you know, what's going on. But with that being said, we're going to play a song and we're going to be right back.
With you by my side. Yeah. In the whip, thinking of your smile and your perfect laugh. I know you're still alive, cause I feel presence. See next to me with you by my side. I'm indestructible, more powerful. I'm gonna make you proud. Saying I don't wanna one south. Fast tracking through the Golden Gate, trying to get home a bye. I know everything's gonna be alright. This last week I seen you in my dream, and you said it ain't bye. You said don't shed no more tears. I just want you to know these sparkling tears contain core memories and spark the projection from the fondest memories of my life. Each tear's a flashback. Each tear runs down my face like a half bag. I celebrate them. This path I was meant for. Pain and lessons, gifts from the heavens, no longer question. They strain my bond, my sons, so we don't commit the same mistakes in the streets cold game. To transform darks to light, we meant for. To help others spark they shine, I was made for. I am king, gradual and unconditional love is what evolved my wings. This is how I flew out of eternal purgatory. Changing my paths to aviate your fly patterns. Move through the cosmos like the Green Lantern. With you by my side, I'm afraid to fly. With you by my side, I feel the urgency to truly live life. With you by my side, I understand we don't ever really die. We walk in stars destined to rise. We rise.
Welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed the song. As always, we're so welcomed for new artists to play for us to play their song. So if you are an artist, local artist, please send us a DM at Tay Radio Marin on Facebook, Instagram. We're so welcome to get in contact with you and arrange something because we want to support you guys. We want to support our youth and our community. Back to our topic. As I was mentioning before we went on the break, that technology has played a huge impact on just in general, right? Human rights, racism, so many other things. It's just people are putting it out there. And to me, comparing kind of as a person from Guatemala and here, a lot of my cousins and family members always say that, oh, America, at least you have the freedom to do this. Mm-hmm. Or the freedom to, for me, a lot of the things that they always say, and I take it as a huge responsibility, is you're a woman who is an example to us because you're speaking out about following your dreams, being able to achieve those dreams that you have, right? Versus them, they're told they're downsized, and it's because of technology. Like if you didn't have technology and you don't have anything to compare yourself to, you wouldn't know what rights you're being denied of.
Right.
And I think that's so crazy. Just how big of an impact technology is. And if we use it as a tool, we can really absolutely make a difference. And there was a guy that was, I was watching Instagram, and he said that 99% of the people are just scrolling and watching videos, and 1% is using, social media to be a voice for those who need it. And that got to me because I was like, whoa, I could be a voice to those people. And when I hear people from all over say that, oh, you're in America and you have these type of freedoms. And like I said before, in my mind, I'm like, but there's a lot of things that are not right. And they're like, but at least you have this versus us. We don't have nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's, whoa. And it makes you think. That's just kind of my experience and with human rights. And like I said, I can say that I believe in God, and I have the right to, to say exactly what I'm saying on this show and not be restricted like other countries are. Like you mentioned how what was it you said North Korea did restrictions?
Yeah, they would just do censorship.
Yeah, censorship. There you go.
Yeah.
And censorship is basically taking things so they wouldn't see it. For example, let me give an example. Let's say there was a video talking about human rights. They would remove that from the social media feed so the community wouldn't see it. Right? That's basically what censorship is. And we don't, well, with us, it's like we can post anything and it's there. And a lot of people, however, there are a lot of people, even Instagram and Facebook, have taken down videos, and young, our youth is out there saying, hey, why did you take this down? Like, we have the opportunity to voice that out, and others can't. And I think that's amazing. But yeah, going back Javier, tell me about your experience and things and events that you've seen regarding human rights.
So, living in America, it is a privilege because I know as a person of color, well, let me phrase that differently. It's a privilege to live in America, but not everything that America offers me as a person of color is available to me.
Very true.
Like, obviously, very obviously. Like, I'm living a much different life than that of a white person who is born into a rich family and has, multiple generations here in America. Like, I'm a first generation Mexican American here, and I didn't have the same. My parents didn't have a big house when I was born. I didn't have dogs. I didn't have a bunch of cars. I didn't have anything. We all started from the bottom. But over time, I feel like as a person of color, the rights that are given to me and the privileges that are given to me here in America compared to what I would get in Mexico are very different. And America does definitely make it easier for people to obtain their dreams. I do still think that the American dream does exist. You just have to, the thing is, when you're in America, you can't be lazy. You just can't be lazy. Because if you're lazy, you're not going to get very far in life, especially if you're a first gen. Like, you need to hustle. You need to put in the time, the effort, the work to build yourself and use these human rights that are given to you in America to their fullest potential, So be able to use your freedom of speech, be able to set up protests, activists, and become an activist and get involved with so many events because you're allowed to do that here in America. But let's say somewhere in Mexico where things aren't so good in certain parts of Mexico, they're not going to allow you to just say, oh, well, my cousin died because of this and that, and he didn't do anything. They don't care. The government doesn't care over there. No one's going to do a big protest on that just because there's been multiple killings in a country, in a part of Mexico, and now they're just going to put it, brush it under the rug because that's what they always do. So it's a whole complicated issue in other countries. And yeah, Mexico, you can buy a house, you can earn money, but there's not that many jobs available to everyone, and it's not always easy for them to find money to build a house or to make land because it's a beautiful country, but there's also so many problems with it, and there's so much violence that still runs around, and not just in Mexico, but in different parts of South America as well. And that makes me happy to be here in Marin County because Marin County is a fairly safe county for the most part. The thing about it, though, is that Marin County is a very white-dominated county, so there's a lot of white people living here in Marin County, and there have been times when I just would get weird looks sometimes, or here's an example that I heard from Adrian, who's one of the staff members here at Multicultural Center of Marin. So he drives the Multicultural Center of Marin van around everywhere, and it has our logo on it and everything. And he's had a couple times where he's parked the car, and there's been a couple all white people say that doesn't belong here, or that. What does that mean? Why is there multicultural? This is I'm a culture. Why aren't white people represented or something? It's just those things are very ignorant. It's very ignorant things to say. But unfortunately, there's a lot of that in Marin County still, and it's not as obvious, but you will find it. As a person of color, you're going to be living a very different life here in Marin County than that of a person who's grown up here their whole life, because Marin County is very rich too.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that, yes, we do have the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom to protest, but it's not an easy path for everybody. It's there, it's written, right? But for people of color, like you said, we've had for me and my family, we're Latinos, so our skin color hasn't been a lot, darker versus someone who's, a person of color.
Yeah.
Their struggles are so different from mine with freedom of speech because they can say something and it's, they can get in trouble. Which I'm saying, it's not impossible for us to live a a
good life. Yeah,
good
good
life.
life.
It's not
Yeah.
impossible.
Not at all.
There's a lot of challenges that come with it, but just being able to speak out about this is a useful thing because, it doesn't just imply one specific community. It's everybody. It's universal.
And just kind of going back to Marin, I wanted to mention a news article that came out either this last, 5 days ago. It was reported 5 days ago, but last week, we'll just say last week. So very recent news. So a black couple living here in Marin, who lives in the Mill Valley area. And for those who might not be familiar with Marin County, Mill Valley is like rich city. Like it's like the rich part of like Marin County. Like Mill Valley, Tiburon, like those places, like that's where it's usually a lot of rich people and a lot of white people. So they were trying to get their home appraised, right? So that they could sell it for money. And when they had the appraisal people come in and take a look at their house, they valued their house at $995,000.
Whoa.
And they were very suspicious of that because that's a very low price for a house in Mill Valley that is full of super expensive houses. And they were suspicious that it had to do with their skin color and their culture because the house was decorated with very, very many things that represented their culture. So what they did was they did something very sneaky, but it ended up working out.
Okay.
Is that they had their white friend pose as the homeowner of the house, and they removed any trace of anything of them being black, basically. And they replaced everything with pictures of white people and just very I guess what the county would see as a white person's home. And when the appraisal people came back to look at the same house that they had just seen, I think it was about 9 months, it's 9 months apart. They saw the house again and they appraised it again and they valued it at $1.482 million.
Whoa. That's a lot.
So $1.4 million.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a $500,000 difference from their first appraisal. So that right there just is very mind-blowing to me, but not surprising because I know Marin County, it likes to see itself as a county that's full of liberal, always non-racist white people who live here, but the reality is there's still a lot of discrimination behind the scenes, and they might not be obvious about it, but something like this really makes me angry because it's a violation of a human right. Why is one couple that isn't white, that shouldn't even matter, right? Getting a lower value on their house than that of a white person acting like they're in the house. It just does. It's crazy to me. And now they're suing the estate company or whatever that did the appraising. And hopefully, I think they're gonna win easily because that right there just doesn't seem to add up very right, and correctly. But what are your thoughts on that? I think it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, it is an interesting story that can cause a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and when someone feels angry because you feel connected to this couple, right? Because, for example, for me, when I hear someone discriminating or denying the human right for someone who's Latina and Latino, I connect with that person because I'm like, what if that was me, right? What if I was in that situation? So it causes a lot of very powerful emotions in someone, and I want to kind of say or guide people or our youth in how you can use those powerful emotions to be a voice for other people. That's very sad. Again, if you want more information, You can definitely look that up. And I really want to touch on the emotional part that you said about how, because that is discrimination.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about protesting safely and the importance of protest, specifically with this example, because like I said, you connect with people, you connect with their stories. So what you want to do is, here are some points that can guide you. So one is assemble, gather with like-minded people that have the same goal as you, right? That's one. Organize and design an effective model of leadership, or to be able to have your voice being heard. Define who are you targeting, right? Who are you? Is it in general? Is it a government specific branch of the government? Is it specific types of people, communities? Define those. Do your research, right? Do your research about that specific thing that you're protesting about. Right, do your research, prepare with time and place, and just seeing all of that, and notify schools, the community that, hey, we're gonna protest. You have the freedom to do it, so notify and publicize too. Get your word out there in peaceful way, and also know your rights. Know your rights as a person too, right? Like, do I have the right to be able to go protest, so I can do it, So knowing your rights, remaining peaceful, meaning that, like I said, you have so much powerful emotions inside you, and if you use it in a productive or positive way, you'll gain a lot out of it. But if you take it to the other side, it can bring. We've seen a lot of disruptive protesting, and like I said, they're angry. They want their words to be out, and I totally get it. But with that, I've seen so many protests that murder has happened, and then the human right is the right to live, right? So, which is wrong too. So, if you want to go protest, take those emotions that get you angry and mad, and it's unfair. Take it and be a voice for the community. Be a voice for a young girl or boy that is struggling with a denied human right. So these are very useful things that you can that can guide you to be able to create or have a protest in the community, which is very important. I'm going to put the link on the Facebook so you guys can kind of have a guide to be able to have all of these, to be able to do these protests. Anything you want to add, Javier?
Well, yeah, I mean, personally, I've only been to a few protests here in Marin, and they're usually pretty respectful and pretty, good. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's ever been a time when there's been, a fight or anything. I think the closest thing was, just arguments between two people who didn't agree, but it never got, violent, It'd get, aggressive with voice, with speech and everything, but it didn't get to a point where someone brought a gun and killed some people. I think that's when things get bad,
Yeah, and there's a lot of communities, not just Marin County, other communities that have had very, big protests. And like I said, their message is powerful. Just use that energy that's inside you. And a lot of, it's going to take more than one protest for people to hear you. I know years and years have gone into being able to have equal rights for both genders, and it's still an ongoing thing. Our voices are being put out there. It's taking a long time. Same with racism. Racism has been not just now, it's been years and years. And it's still an ongoing thing. And it doesn't mean they already started it. It's enough. No, your voice still counts to that.
And you want to know one thing that's always kind of bugged me? Not everyone might agree with me on this, but, back to social media and that being a platform for people to raise awareness, I feel like when white people specifically on social media speak for like a whole community that isn't them. So let's say they speak towards the black community or they speak to the Latino community regarding an issue or anything. I think that's kind of dumb because they're not Latino. They're not black. They're not a person of color. They're white. And I don't have anything against white people at all. But I'm just saying that I feel their credibility kind of goes down when they speak for a whole community that, you know, yeah, maybe they could have been a part of it, but they didn't grow up Latino. They didn't grow up black, you know? And to me, certain aspects of like advocating for one's rights should be done by the people who those rights are made for, right? So if a Latino is fighting for their rights to be heard, it's, for me, I feel like it'd be more powerful for the Latino to be the ones really, really giving those answers instead of having a white person speak for them. I guess that's what kind of makes me mad, is that white people speaking for another community when they really shouldn't be speaking for that community. Because the whole point is them getting the same rights as them, as those white people, even though that it shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be having to fight the rights that the white people, you know what I mean?
Can you clarify on that? Are you saying that it's culturally inappropriate for a white person to speak for Latinos or
Yes.
a person of color?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't expect everyone to agree with me on that, but it's just something that's always kind of put me off, or kind of just made me a little angry, because like when it comes to like rights and people of color not having those rights available to them, just because white people are the ones enforcing those rules and enforcing that discrimination and racism onto these people of color, it feels so weird for another white, I don't know.
Yeah, I do see that. I think...
And I guess there is that other perspective where maybe it is a good thing for white people to be speaking out, because then it makes other white people that were racist or discriminatory towards, or violated basically human rights of another person that isn't white, maybe look at it in a different light. I can understand that perspective too, but yeah, I'll let you talk.
No, it's great. I think just being able, for me, it's always about, or the way I see it is teamwork. If
definitely.
Working as a community, and a community to me doesn't mean necessarily one specific group. It means being able to be a multicultural community that helps one another. So let's say I'm a Latina struggling with let's say immigration thing is status, and if my peers are there to help me, I can definitely see that support. And if another community is struggling, I want to be able there to speak with them, right? Their voices must be the main ones being heard, but I want to be there because I want to be there to show my support and say that I'm also with you. I hear you. And I know that we talk a lot about white people, and we had a show before, and they mentioned that even white people get discriminated, where it's like white people in general, not all white people. There are a lot of, that's what I'm saying, it's so complicated.
It's a complicated thing,
because not all white people are racist, not all white people think the same.
Obviously.
And even with Latinos and people of color, not all of them think the same. But our main message is for you guys to be a voice for your community. Take a look around you and see, and you might be scared to speak out. I know for me, as a background of not just Latina, my family, we have our own other language that's aside from Spanish. And I struggled so hard with being a voice because I think much before being on Tay, I struggled really hard. And now I'm like, if you're afraid, how do you expect other people to do the same?
Right.
So just being a voice, and that a voice can mean in so many different ways. It's not really just going for protests. You use your talents that you have inside you, that energy that you have inside, to be able to support your community. I know for me, I'm not a lot in I don't go to a lot of protests or stuff, but I use this platform to be able to represent my Latino and Latina communities, right? So just being able to be a voice, and if you see something that is denying someone of human rights, think about what you can do. Yeah, speak up. Think about what you can do. Like I said, America is not perfect.
And social media, like as much hate as I have for it, it's also really good for bringing awareness, as much as I hate to say. Like, let's say you do see someone get, like, the police being brutal to someone when they really shouldn't be doing that, or the police doing something, because that's really big right now, is there's a lot of tension between
police
people
brutality.
And police brutality, because it exists. There's plenty of videos, plenty of stories of people who have died tragically to police brutality, and that's a big thing that a lot of people are fighting for, and I'm more than supportive of that, because I don't think, if police are here to help protect and serve their communities, why are they killing so many innocent people? It's just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm glad that a lot of these police officers are being called out for their wrongdoings and being put in the negative light, because they don't deserve to be getting away with things like that. So, just recording and making sure that people are becoming aware of, and sharing your story too, of whatever is violating your human rights. Share it all over social media, and it'll blow up, and people will listen to you, because there's a lot of people out there who want to help you out, and that to me is awesome.
Thank you, Javier. Do you have any other things you'd like to say before we end the show?
Well, I did want to mention that this is going to be our last show in the studio. It's been a really great time being here. We're very excited to show everyone what our new studio will be like. We're only just going to keep on improving and getting up there. And just in regards to the show today, I think human rights should be given to every single person in this entire world. But the world isn't perfect, as we've clearly talked and said now.
It's definitely not.
There's always hope, and you always have your voice. Your voice is always there. And there's always going to be ways for you to find ways to speak up. And keeping things and if you ignore things such as being discriminated or having your rights violated in any way, then people are just going to keep doing them. So you have to call them out as much as you can, so that we can start squashing down the amount of human rights violations that are going on. Because that's really, it's a big community thing. We all have to come together as humans to equally have human rights.
Yeah, thank you so much, Javier. I know that it's not easy. You guys probably watch us and they're like, oh my God, they're talking. These are very hard topics for us. They challenge us. They push us to do research. They push us to really think about not just our own perspectives, but really kind of branch out and look at other people's and other communities' perspectives. So we definitely want to thank you guys for always watching, tuning in, and if we're learning too, right? We're learning about human rights and racism and equal rights. It's an ongoing thing. And our country is not perfect, but there are definitely opportunities out there, and it might not be so easy for everybody, but it's not impossible. And we want to really just put these topics out there so you can go out there, take what you like, and if there are things you disagree with us and things you didn't like that we said, leave it there. Take what you can use and use it to be able to be a voice, be a leader in your community, and really use all the gifts that you have inside you, and use it your own way, right? So we're really grateful, and again, thank you to Annalie and Kimberly, who are running the show backstage. Thank you so much, guys. And for all of you guys who are watching, we really appreciate it. This is absolutely an amazing team to work with. And the show is nothing without our audience, without our Tay family. So thank you. And we will see you guys
in a few weeks. You're probably going to see a few reruns. But it's going to be a little weird, but Don't worry. We have lots of exciting things packed for next year.
Yeah, so